Hello, innovators, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship with my guests. Today is a slightly different episode where Stephen Brooks and myself discuss innovation from a lot of different angles to kind of really demystify of what innovation is and specifically focus a little bit more on the real estate and retail industry. Please welcome Stephen Brooks and myself to the show. Hello, Stephen. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Jens, I'm great, mate. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah,
it's a bit like the old days with the curtain at the back there.
I was about to say
this is a retro edition, right?
Yeah, we're back in time when I was recording my first, I think, 20, 30 episodes with a curtain behind me. But for everyone who is listening to this, you will not bother at all, I guess. And for the two people who are watching this somewhere, it's because I moved to Spain and it's very hot outside. That's why now in the basement. That's the YouTube studio is still in the build up.
Cool.
Awesome to be with you, Stephen. Looking forward to the episode today. And the topic of today is innovation. Innovation, what is in one of the other episodes you mentioned, like, it's kind of a buzzword and kind of a lot of people are using it, similar to sustainability and other buzzwords that are out there. And we said we need to do an episode around innovation. And of course, because we both come from the retail and real estate industry, we bring that into that direction so that people who are working in retail real estate get a little bit more opportunities to have a look at the innovation piece. But let's start with definition. What is innovation for you?
So you're right. You know how this came out was our discussion with Ron and Ulrika on one of the breakfast innovation podcasts, where I said that I think innovation is being misinterpreted, just like everybody's using the word entrepreneur. Okay. And as you quite rightly said, sustainability. And so, for me, innovation isn't just about technology and creating new tech or new apps or new platforms. For me, innovation is a totally different way of looking at your business and thinking about how you can be creative and better and excel in your business, whether that's just by the way that you get your trash collected, or whether it is a complete e-commerce platform. I think innovation, and certainly from the industries that we're in, innovation's been certainly in the background, and we know there's a lot of stuff been done in logistics and POS systems and things like that, but that's more operational. And I think when you look at malls and retailers in the round, that there's very little innovation at the sharp end. So and I know that there'll be a lot of people going, well, we've been through COVID and we innovated through COVID. And as we were just saying, but before we came on air, actually I don't think that was survival. There's that phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. So you had to do something to survive, and you can call it creative thinking. I think innovating is listen, even if you take click and collect or curbside, one person came up with the idea and everybody jumped on the bandwagon, right? That's not innovation, that's copying. So I think you've got to boards, regional managers, senior people in the business, whatever, have to just take a step back and go, as a business, how can we be better? In whichever direction that might be, whether it's marketing, lighting, product, sustainability, whether it's through recruitment, training, staff development, property development, whatever it might be, instead of thinking that innovation is purely a tech-led silo right now.
Yeah.
If that's the right phrase.
Yeah. For me, innovation starts from the inside out. And I always try to
Agreed.
explain it on the fascinating donut model, which is especially used in some industries. No, I always say, if you want to work with innovation, and for me innovation is like transformative innovation. It's not like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's use a different color and show things differently. It's really, how do we enable our business to double the revenue? How do we change the business model to completely disrupt the industry? How can
Yeah.
we use completely different approaches to make a leap instead just a larger step? So that's for me what I'm after innovation, not the day-to-day improvements. I think that's, for me, it's normal business. Every company should
Mm-hmm.
and need
Sure.
to do that to improve. But from the inside out is really starting with the top management and or owner, depending how big the organization is,
Yeah.
and then starting from there, influencing the employees, and then working with the partners, the friends and organizations around you, and of course the customers. But
Mm-hmm.
really, what I always say is start from the inside out and take processes, take technology, everything to the side, because you can have the best technology ever. If your management is deciding against it, and then in a later stage, or somewhere a regional head of a department is not willing to implement and is just blocking it, it's not going to happen. It can be the best and effective technology of the world, it's just not going to happen. That's why I always start from the inside out. Start with the management, the leadership, build capabilities that help you to innovate throughout, and then
Yeah.
bring all the great ideas in and figure out how you do that. Then you talk about processes and so on. But it's
So
really,
so I love the way that you frame that in terms of, the little steps, the day-to-day operation of any business, right?
yeah,
That's not innovation, but making the leap. I love the way you phrase that. That these are leaps for profitability, leaps in thinking. I think
yeah.
it's a really succinct way of putting it.
And that's also because when I've had the opportunity to do everything wrong in my past, working in large organization and working and kind of designing innovation engines inside of large organization, what I just have seen is, when you start with the small things, the day-to-day operation, how do we squeeze 2% more out of this finance engine, or how can we change the client, or if we go into the real estate world, how can we improve the flexibility of that asset in a different way, of that, even if
Mm,
you go into rental spaces, how can you do that in a more effective way? Then you work
mm,
with ideas that are normally day-to-day business of the leasing team, of the operational team of a shopping center, or of a retail facility. You take their ideas away. If you organize, let's say, even if you want to organize an innovation department, let's say, you work against the business, not with the business. If you don't have an innovation department, which I am in favor right now, though that I was thinking differently in the past, it's way easier because you just enable the total business to innovate if you do it
mm,
right, if you do it from the inside out. And then you focus a couple of directions on the really strategic big jumps. And if you get the management team behind this and then the strategy and the business plans behind it, it's way easier to organize and way easier to get into the business and as well into action. Because it always sounds nice doing innovation on the paper and talking about it, but as long as it's not bringing the effect on the profit and loss, it's all nice. But it's not really helping the business to transform or move the needle.
So, do you think that's why then that perhaps businesses are reticent or even scared about having innovation departments, because they're kind of like, you know, we're going to potentially invest money in people and resource to come up with ideas that may or may not impact the profitability of our business? Do you think that kind of that puts blinkers on boards or owners because they're scared of change or scared of innovating in big ways?
Yeah, I wouldn't say scared. It's more about being resourceful and getting the
Yeah.
understanding of it. And for me, it's not. In case people understand that wrong, I'm not against innovation department. It's more about what about the timing? What is the timing of the innovation department and what is their role? You can build an innovation department or team that's facilitating the process of the organization or of the
Hmm.
transformation of that organization. I'm all
Agreed.
up for this. But if you just build a team that's a little bit more creative than the others, or have a little bit more money than the others, or a little bit more freedom than the others, then you create tension in an ecosystem, which sometimes you can design that if you want to have that tension. It's always strategic decisions, but in the end, you need to focus on a long-term success story. And if you want to be long-term successful with your business, build the culture you want to see, and it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And from our previous podcasts and stuff, I'm big on that in terms of culture.
Yeah.
That if who wants to work for a business that has a high turnover of staff that maybe don't get listened to, or they don't pay well. If you look at people like Apple and Southwest Airlines, I know people hold those up all the time, and
Mm.
and in retail specifically, there are a couple of really good examples of that. I mean, even Amazon, in terms of investing in education for people. Walmart have a collegiate program and so on, which is great, and encouraging people into the business. But it's, as you say, if the culture's not right to start with, then you've got an uphill battle
Yeah.
before you even begin, I guess. So from the work that you've done, who are the people you think fit best into that kind of innovation, um, innovation department, but are best suited to that innovation mold? Are they the guys at the very top that are focused on profitability and moving the business forward in big ways, or is it the guy at the sharp end who maybe sits on a checkout register, who sees the business every day, talks to customers? What or is it a mix? What's your thought on that?
Definitely a mix. Because in the
Right.
end, you need to have all the different capabilities and all the different ways of thinking that will make the magic. And that's often,
Yeah.
specifically in very, very large organizations like I have been, like 150,000 employees or 500,000 employees, you're automatically working in silos. I mean,
Mm.
everyone is saying, in at least in my last 15 years, everyone is saying we're not working in silos. If you are that big, you will always work
You
in
are,
silos. There's
of
no
course. Yeah.
other chance to survive. So, um, specifically, this large organizations, if you're not taking the approach that you break these silos inside of this, I always call it connecting um, organisms in an organization. When you work with
Hmm.
innovation, you need to build a connecting organism that enables the organization to work together, um, and bring all the insight and all the capabilities from the business into that engine to be able then to bring that again outside afterwards. Because the person on the checkout, if we take that example, and maybe the CFO, they will never meet, or not usually meet in the
Hmm.
company setting, fairly
Sure.
rarely at least.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you put them together on something very, very practical, which both can put in and take away their hierarchy thinking and take away their like stars on the shoulders, and really look into how do we solve this problem? How can we use the knowledge we have about the customer, about the finance world, combined, and figure out how we can solve this in a different way that is enhancing the life of the customer, enhancing the process, enhancing the cost structure, enhancing the revenue streams, whatever they're focusing on.
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
best, and for me, it's the only way how you will do this successfully long term. You can always throw in externals like us, who do this for you, and then when we are gone, it's like it drops again. I've seen it, and it works, of course, in a short burst, but it's not long term successful. And that's also what I'm still working as an external with companies, but my whole way of thinking is that you need to empower and enable the organization to do it.
Mm.
And that's sometimes hard to sell because it takes longer. Everyone wants to have the results today, not tomorrow, today. Like you come in as an external and we want to have results today. If you want to build capabilities, if you want to build the possibility for internal people to step up, it takes time, or it requires time to be successful. And that's at least my philosophy, my English,
Philosophy.
my German English, philosophy. Um, how large organization, but also small ones, can be successful. But it really
I,
starts with the leadership. It's key part
sure.
for me.
Sure. And there's two things I want to pick up from that. First of all, about this instant results, right? Because we live in a very instant world, right? You know,
Yeah.
communication,
Yeah.
texting, WhatsApping, whatever. And I think as human beings, we're in that mindset that things happen now. You know, think result. More agile in smaller businesses, where you 500,000 people in a business, nothing's going to happen overnight anyway.
Mm.
But in smaller, and again, if we take this back to retail, smaller retailers or one or two store owner businesses, then yes, you can make change quickly and see the results of that. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on was you saying about bringing in people like ourselves. All we're really doing is being the catalyst to get people
Exactly.
thinking in the right way, not even in the right direction, because that innovation, I believe, can go off at, like a spider's web, right? So when experts like us do come into businesses, there is an expectation of, we're going to see instant change. I think you're absolutely right, but I think people need to understand that actually, in instant change, this sounds silly, but you'll know what I mean. Instant change comes over time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen like in the next hour. And then the other thing I thought was interesting that you said, and I want to pick up on again, is about that communication. Because for me, I think that's the first starting point of innovation, is what are your lines of communication, in order that you can get the ideas. Like you said, a checkout operator is very unlikely to meet the CFO or the CMO or whatever, right? In the course of the natural business. So making sure that there are free and accessible lines of communication where people can feel involved and part of change, be that small or big leap, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that again comes back to your culture. Having worked in retail in very early on in my career, where there was very much a Dickensian dictatorial way of things being done. The word came down and off you went and did it, and people would turn around and go, "Who on earth came up with this bullshit? This just doesn't work. This is crazy, right?" So and thankfully things have changed. But I think the lines of communication, understanding that we're catalysts, and then understanding that change isn't instant in actually in any business, because you still need to you still need to train and work through processes. Which, if we take that back then to like landlords and malls and that kind of stuff, my fear about the survival tactics and survival ideas that we came up with during COVID will very much get left behind now,
Hmm.
because we'll get back to some kind of normal, and we're heading in that direction already. And people will go, oh, well, we can just go back to the way we used to do things.
Because
You
it
know,
has worked the last 50 years at plus.
yeah, we've become, well, 50 years ago we didn't have online shopping, right? 50 years ago we didn't have these. It's like, how can we coexist? How can we bring, better experiences? How can we, um, want our consumer to come to us? Remember, people go to grocery stores for a need. People don't think, oh, I must go to want to go to the grocery. That's a necessity, right? And
Yeah.
I think malls have actually become that kind of vehicle as well, that people now go because, well, we have to. This is what we do. We go to the mall, and yes, they've become. There's a great, if anybody knows who Eddie Izzard is, Eddie Izzard talks about supermarkets and big box stores and so on becoming like, the modern day cathedrals that we worship in, and we rush there and so on. Great sketch if you get to hear it. But he's right. We go to these enormously big environments that are overwhelming, either through choice or people, or just the things that are going on, and I worry that we kind of retailers miss so many opportunities about that.
Hmm.
And if you're a landlord, if you're a mall owner, if you're the ICSE, we have some great ideas about how you could begin your innovation process. That was the sales pitch, everybody. But that you should really be thinking about it. You should really be embracing it.
Yeah. It's
Um,
it, it's quite funny because for me I'm a big proponent of system thinking. And for me, the
mhm,
whole retail real estate ecosystem is in one system, which is on one side, it's capital, which is the money. People
mhm,
or funds, in the end, it's people investing into real estate.
mhm,
And the business model and is historically though so driven that you build real estate and you rent it out to retailers, rent it out to leisure operators, and so on. And that's just the basic business model, and that hasn't changed over the
mhm,
last, I don't know, decades. And it's very, very hard to change that, because if you try to change it, it's a huge chain reaction throughout, which is which is often not understood. That we did a test in 2016. I mean, it's not that long ago, but we looked
mhm,
into what if you turn a shopping center around and take an entrance fee. Everyone of the project team and everyone around us was said that's completely nuts. Nobody will ever pay an entrance fee into something like this. But everyone
mhm.
is going to Walt Disney World and is paying a hell of a lot of money to go into a shopping center. There's just a little bit more experience around built around the shopping experience, so that it's not the center point, it's not the shopping center, um the shopping experience, and there's no roof on top of everything. But in the end, if you think differently, it's a shopping center, it's a shopping place where you spend time,
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
meeting place. There are different words around as well in the industry. So
Mhm,
for me, it's really cracking this to really, I think it only needs one bold company to say, we will change the business model of, let's say, if it's a real estate investment company
mhm,
and or
mhm.
operator, we will change the business model and we will figure out how to do this. This company will win the next 20 years. I'm 100% convinced in that. Because if you figure this mechanics out, you can completely change the game. For example, you give the space for free to all retailers. if you get an entrance fee from the customers going to the shopping center as a basic assumption, and then you build on turnover to that, you will have a bigger rent than today.
So that's a really interesting thought process, right? And while you're talking, I'm thinking, well, if you look at some of the experiential stuff that's around in retail right now, the office experience, the monopoly experience, where people are paying entrances to go into, retail environments, because at the end of the day they do sell products and so on. Although, you're getting a kind of 360 of everything that encompasses. I wonder if landlords would look at like even just areas within malls to say, here's the Gucci's, the Louis Vuittons, the Jimmy Choos are all in this section, but to get there, like you say, you have to pay an entrance fee. There's kind of this VIP exclusivity aspect that makes
100% no problem at all. It's just you just need to test and try it. You can build an app experience around this, which enhance the digital part. Like no problem at all. It just requires thinking differently and being bold enough to say we do it. And that's the tricky thing. Specifically we're right now still in a pandemic state worldwide.
Yeah.
Yes, some parts of the world are saying we're out of it already, but it's kind of not everyone is back to normal. Specifically in retail, people are not back to normal everywhere. And we're still in a survival mode thinking. At least that's what I see in the industry, and maybe it's different in different parts of the world. But everyone is happy. Yeah, we have survived. For me, it's like double down right now. Really get things moving and try completely different things nobody else would ever be trying. And even, let's say, if you're a very large corporation, you have a couple of 100 shopping centers or even 20 shopping centers. Worst case, you mess up one. Or even not one fully, but like the turnover of one, and like take, let's say, half of it or a quarter of it, a corner of it, and try it, prototype it. It's going to work.
Yeah.
If you're willing to put the time in to say, this is a prototype, we test, validate until we figure out either it's not going to work or we find a way how it's going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. So if you look at businesses like Souk, micro activations, only you pay a premium when obviously it's the best time to be there, but you don't need to be there the whole time. I wonder, and Souk are doing great business in Europe and the UK. If you take a look at souk.spaces.net, I think is their URL. That disruptive, and I believe that is innovation, because they've taken that whole specialty leasing pop-up retail area and gone, which we're chucking out what we're bringing in something completely new, and I'm pretty sure that first few months of the business, people were kind of like, don't get it, don't understand it, and here they are, growing really, really fast and doing some great work, disrupting that kind of niche in the industry. So I think you're right that somebody's got to be bold enough with something like that to go, what's the worst that can happen? If nothing else, from a PR aspect, you would get so much free PR about it anyway.
Absolutely.
If you think, when Ryanair said that they were going to charge you €1 on a plane to use the restrooms, they were never going to do that. But the column inches that they got from just even muting the idea brought them so much visibility. It was unbelievable, right? So I think you're right. So, and so, in your opinion, then, is being innovative intrinsically linked to being bold?
Not necessarily. It's more for me. It's more about in this industry right now. For me, innovation, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about how do you increase revenue?
Yeah.
Be how are you more successful, and that to a leap perspective? And it's not
Hmm.
always revenue, but it's how can you be more successful? How can you make a greater impact in this world through doing things differently? And I know that this industry has been so successful. I have worked, 20 years in that industry in different positions. It has been successful throughout, and way longer before I was born even. um, it's hard to change. It's hard to change mindset. It is hard to change behaviors that have been successful, where you have been trained. This is how the capital market works
Hmm.
in context of retail real estate. And that's how you're getting trained. That's how everything works. So the market dynamics are all in that direction. If you now you decide as a successful business, you step out of that and you decide to do things differently, you need to do it both. That's the you can't just
Hmm.
do this on the side a little bit, because you're working inside and to the external market with the forces. Because let's say if you're the managing director of one business area of a large corporation doing this manager needs to work with all the ecosystem internally and
Hmm.
convince them
Yeah.
every time we're going to win. It just takes time and it's painful, and then the external forces will play against that as well. That's just how it works. If you're not bold,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. Then it's better not to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Like, well, I guess it's where retail started by being bold, isn't it? From moving away
Yeah.
from small, individual stores to big grocery stores, and or moving away from um, building department stores and then building malls. And it's funny that's actually coming full circle, isn't it? Because people now are moving away from big department stores, and are looking far more at niche retailing and specialists in their area. I think, and certainly that's what I've seen in my business. This
Mm.
whole shift away from, and like, you can't get the service in a big department store anymore like you could 30 years ago. You hear that all the time. But if you walk into smaller environments where it really matters. And in fact, I'll give you a classic example of that only happened yesterday. We were shopping for eyeglasses yesterday and went into two very, very well known eyeglass retailers
Mm.
and one independent, was smaller, like 2 or 3 store chain. And the 2 or 3 store chain outperformed by 200% the service, the
Mm.
understanding that the big, the well-known names did. And even in terms of styles, and it's just the way in which they were interested in the consumer.
Mm.
And so excuse me, there's I think you can learn a lot from taking a look at what smaller businesses are doing, and why they are successful, and maybe feeding that back into your um, feeding that back into your own innovation process, to go, how can we be agile like that, or how can we deliver like that. And you know obviously a lot
Yeah.
of that comes down to the individual on the front line, etc., etc. But we were very, very surprised about how that panned out, because we actually thought it would have been totally the other way. That this particularly well-known brand, and I don't want to say who it is, would be very top drawer, would, in terms of service, in terms of styles, in terms of just in fact, just in terms of the way in which they were managing you trying on glasses in a COVID environment.
Mm.
To- Total opposites. Total opposites. So
And then
it's
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 for the interesting part is then always, is it the strategy that has decided we go for this particular experience because we know it's maybe not fitting to you, but it's fitting to 80% of the others. And then the smaller one can't decide. They just can differentiate through the service they give. So it's always hard to, like, hearing
Yeah,
your
yeah.
story. I get your point, but for me it's always hard to understand. Okay, so what is the strategy? What is the success factor of that bigger cooperation? Because they wouldn't be as big if they wouldn't be doing something
No,
right.
no, no,
And
no,
then
absolutely.
it's more being flexible enough and understand that, and then looking into if they want to innovate, which makes a bigger impact to their business, a bigger impact to their potential customers. Maybe it's not going into let's build the best service. Maybe it's going to do it digitally or do it whatever. So that for me, it's also and it's important to understand every company needs to find the right way for them. I
Mm-hmm.
hate
Agreed.
and hate is maybe a hard word for this when that's happening a lot in the industry as well. There was an amazing system. I've seen that in that mall. Let's say something very basic, mall navigation systems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've seen this. We need the same, and then it's just jumping on the technology, not
Yeah.
understanding that hey, maybe we could do that in half the price without the technology if we just build them all in a different way, design things in a different way, signs in a different way, just a couple of basics. I still
Agreed.
remember when I started in retail and had the opportunity to walk with someone who was like in the early days in IKEA, the furniture company, for those who have never
Yeah.
heard about it. and and he was like one of the first 50 employees of that business, and he walked with me around and showed me how an IKEA store is working and a couple of
Mm-hmm.
details. And then he was, see, that's why nobody needs a sign for an elevator, because you can see it is an elevator. And I was standing in front of it like, oh yeah, that's clever. But just some basic things like this, I think that's sometimes it's not going super tech. Sometimes it's as well understanding the context and understanding humans and going back to basics. Maybe you don't need a sign at all because there are 20,000 signs in front of you and you're just puzzled where to
You
go.
become, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
it's always something you need to understand on a local context inside of that business. What is the right decision? That's always the hard thing. It always
Yeah.
sounds easy from the outside or looks easy, but
No,
it's
no, no, I
it's
agree.
hard.
But if you take IKEA, since you brought it up, the way in which they were retailing was vastly different from how
Yeah,
everybody else was doing. I mean, completely different. Racetrack. Round the store. As you say, combining a food experience in store with a shopping experience, um, collecting your own merchandise
yeah,
in a way that was easy, and people, I do know when the first one opened in the UK, people were going, not that they wanted anything, but they were going because they'd heard this was such a different way to retail
yeah,
and such a different way to shop, and obviously for the meatballs, but um, the whole experience was vastly different. And and here's the thing: I don't see anybody that really took that to the next stage, or
yeah.
or, or, or kind of worked with that. This is a really clever idea. Why aren't we trying to develop this idea in our own way?
The tricky thing is, and that's also, I only know this because I'm grown up in that ecosystem.
Sure,
It's
sure.
again system thinking. It's not just the
Mhm.
meatball that makes a difference. It's not just that you
No,
pick
no,
up your
sure.
things. It's the totality, the total ecosystem going end to end from the whole value chain approach and so on and so on. That's the difficult thing. That's why only a few will be able ever to copy it. But
Yeah.
I agree, and then that goes maybe full circle in the boldness as well. Other
Yes.
other people would say it's maybe stubbornness, and I've had the possibility to meet the founder of IKEA. he was so brilliant, so bold, but also so stubborn that he was able to get things in his direction how he was thinking, but with the customer in mind in every single thing. Every single thing was focused on the customer. How do
Hmm.
I get this family buying a chair if they're hungry? We need to figure
Mm.
out how we get food. So just these basic things, and that maybe sounds trivial, but is then being bold enough and saying we're just building a restaurant on top of a furniture store or inside of a furniture store, which wasn't existing, I guess, at least at that time. And I
Mm.
think that's similar things we need to figure out today in a couple of clever retailers because they're out there. There are a couple
Hmm.
of owners and a couple of people who are capable of doing that. It's more about build the system that helps you to do that. And really being bold right now, it's not the easiest thing as well. I see it with my own business. I mean, it's not easy. It's always a risk.
No, I think you're right. The I was going to say about him being the founder of IKEA being stubborn, or was he just, or was it just strong leadership that he had a vision that he was committed to and wanted to execute on that and wasn't going to compromise. And I
Yeah.
think that's what happens a lot, isn't it? That you kind of have, this is the gold standard, or this is the platinum standard, diamond standard, whatever you want to call it, and somewhere along the line it gets diluted because you have to compromise because of different aspects of the business you can't get on board.
Yeah.
So yeah, strong leadership. The other thing I think that certainly as you go through business life, whether people do what we do, or you're a retailer, or you make widgets, the longer your journey goes on, I think that you actually you do become less bold. And actually what you should be doing, because you have the experience and you have the knowledge, is you should be being more bold, because you've got all of that intel behind you, data behind you, the understanding of your business, to know that that's the right decision in terms of being bold.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Should be. The tricky thing is you have as well. You run into so many walls over 20 years that it's going to hurt if you run against that wall again, because some walls are fairly strong, you can't run through it, and some are less strong and you can run through it. So I think it's also being mindful of what other things you burn yourself in and what not. At least in big corporations, the whole political game, and we don't need to go into this right
No,
now.
no, yeah,
But
no, absolutely.
it's part of the ecosystem. If you don't play well in a political ecosystem, it's not going to fly. You can be the boldest person in the organization, as even as the CEO. You might be out in
Yeah,
2 months.
yeah,
So
agreed.
bringing the buy-in from the shareholders, depending on the company structure and or the owners, is key part of this. That's why I always say
Yeah,
inside out. Start with the
yeah.
management, which includes the board, which includes the ownership structure, and then get innovation moving.
Mm,
So
mm.
how do we bring the episode to an end?
Well, I want to ask one more question just before, to get your take on that. This is a bit of a reverse.
Yeah,
It
that's
seems like a
good.
bit of a reverse episode, but you have so much knowledge, and I think we don't see a lot of that when we do when we do stuff, and you're the host. So, how much do you believe innovation is linked to tactical? You know what I mean? That we see, actually your wayfinder in malls is a classic example, that we see that this business is doing that. Oh, and we really like that, we should do that. Do you think people like just go with the well, they've solved it, so we'll just use that? Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That where does it become tactical in terms of innovation, like the IKEA thing. That's a great. How do we take that to the next level? How do we improve on that, or how do we make that work in our business, if that's even possible?
The tricky thing with that is if you haven't built in the innovation culture into the business,
Mm-hmm.
you can it's often just about the intention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and building that then into tactical and strategical level. The tricky thing with the wayfinding example is we have a problem right now. We have customer complaints. That's the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go operation. Okay, we have a survey system and we figure out that the customer complaints in our shopping mall went up over the last 2 years and nobody knows where to go. And then they're looking into, okay, what is the fastest silver bullet or even golden bullet to fix that, instead
Sure.
of looking what have you changed over the last 2 years that it is worse right now. Maybe they have
Mm-hmm.
added a new signage project which is like plastering the whole mall with signage. And I think this for me as well, the tactical elements where he's like, take a step back and don't go just for the flashy thing which sounds amazing and you have an app to use it and so on. It costs you I don't know how many gazillions to operate.
Sure. Sure.
It's more as well understanding, again, system. What are the different things that are not working? How do you set it up that it is working? And maybe the technology is exactly what you need, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
instead of getting, we are all from impulse buyers, especially in retail. We all know that, um, and that's always, at least I've seen it so often in organization that work with retail and real estate. You always try to get to the fastest solution,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that means you're buying the very expensive wayfinding system, which then doesn't help you to solve the customer complaints.
Doesn't solve it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and that's, it's always a difficult answer on that one. For me, it's you need to work on strategic, on tactical, but informed by the operations. I'm
Sure.
a big proponent of that as well, because I come from the operations. I know that, and we talked about that in length in the Innovation Breakfast Club, which was all
Sure.
about the front lines. Um,
Frontline. Yeah.
people know what's going on if you work and meet customers every day.
Mm.
Don't know if that
Absolutely.
answers your
No, no, no,
your
no, no. It
question
does.
properly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it does. I think it does. It's and good insights. And like I was saying, we don't get this much of you when you're hosting.
No, I'm the question.
So you're normally asking the questions. So
Yeah, exactly.
it was nice. And anybody that's listening, Jens's depth of knowledge and experience is to be treasured and sought after, because he's he is an innovator. You are an innovator. That you prove that time and time again. So you were asking about how we wrap this up. That was
Thanks
your
for the
plug,
plug,
by the
by
way.
the way.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, for me, I think, and again, bringing it back to retail and mall owners, landlords, and all of that, I think that don't think that survival ideas are innovation. That's my
Mm,
first thing. Don't think that things are going to go back to just being how they were pre-COVID anyway. And even though there's been many changes,
mhm,
I think that look at lines of communication, because I believe that's the key starting point. But like as we were saying, be bold enough even just to create your innovation department. Be bold enough to put a stake in the ground, draw a line in the sand, however you want to define it, and go, actually, we're gonna think about this
yeah.
more, rather than having the suggestion box that occasionally people might put an idea in, and actually seek out people, like we were saying, that will get you started, will be the catalyst to show you how you need to maybe organize that department or think in that department, or be open and be bold to listen, in order for you to then push forward and make that significant change, that leap that really does catapult the business forward in a way that leaves the competition behind. Right. And the other, stop copying people.
But why?
If you're in retail, stop copying people. I mean, it's great. Look at the idea, but come up with a better solution for you. Don't just it works for them, it'll work for me, because actually most of the time it doesn't.
Yeah, true. Just one last thing to add: do it instead of talk about it.
Absolutely,
we are way too good in talking and not good enough often in large organizations to work. And I've seen it myself working in an innovation department on the ground doing projects. You only win if you do the work. If you try and error on a daily basis, and this is at least in my experience, the way to innovate, doing it. If you just talk about it or have it in a strategy, going back to the beginning as a buzzword, like you need to mention innovation at least 5 times on one page to be able to get the strategy approved or the business plan. That's not going to move the needle of the business.
No, you're absolutely right. Do it now. Yeah. Don't talk about it. Get stuck in.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure doing a slightly different episode this time.
It was. Yeah.
Hope we can do more of that. It's fun. I need to speak way more than usual, but
well, listen, I wasn't blowing smoke up your backside when I was saying about the depth of knowledge that you have, and again, to anybody that's listening, if you're thinking innovation, you need to be thinking Jens Heitland, in my opinion.
Another plug.
Another plug. You've helped me in my business and change my thinking. So, from a personal point of view, I can't recommend you enough to anybody. It's just, I think you're amazing. I truly, truly do.
Stephen, thank you. We need to close.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. See ya. Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any question to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on social media and contact me there.